Thank you. We had some technical difficulties. Moving to our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Jar Jar Wurrung, Eastern Maar and Watchabollock tribes whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. I call for any apologies. No apologies. Any notice of disclosure of interest by councillors or officers? None. Item 7,
Mr.
confirmation.
Mayor.
Sorry.
It's Councillor Clark. Can you just confirm whether Councillor Vance is with us, and just so that because people can't see him, just to understand that he's on the phone, or if he's not with us yet?
Councillor Vance, are you still with us there, or have you dropped out again?
Oh, I'm definitely here, Councillor Clark.
Thank you.
That's good, Councillor Vance. We just can't see you. I want to make sure the community know that you're here and on the job. Thank you.
Apologies, we are having a few little technical difficulties, but we'll work through them. Item 7, confirmation of the previous minutes. There's a recommendation technical there difficulties to the previous meeting. Do I have someone to? We have Tanya Keogh, and seconded by Ron Eason. Thank you. Business arising. Any business arising out of the minutes? No. Item 9, public participation. Members of the public.
Yeah, it's just a technical point. If you could ask the councillors to vote on the motion, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. We have a nomination and a second. All those in favour? Thank you. Good pick up, Jim.
Thank you.
Public participation. Members of the public are encouraged to ask questions of council at ordinary council meetings. In normal times, questions may be asked by members of the public in person. However, at present, community members are not permitted to attend council meetings in person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Questions can be submitted online through council's website by mail or hand delivered. It is preferred that questions be submitted at least 1 hour prior to the commencement of the meeting. A person can submit a maximum of 2 questions on any topic, and the questions and its response shall not exceed 5 minutes. Questions are read by the chairperson during public participation. The chairperson may accept or reject any question or summarise the question before putting it to the meeting. The chairperson may disallow a question if it is phrased as a statement rather than a question, relates to matters outside the duties, functions and powers of council, is defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant or objectionable in language or content, is a repetition of a question already asked or answered, is aimed at embarrassing a councillor or council officer. The chairperson or councillor or council officer to whom a question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for the next ordinary meeting. I do note we do have a number of questions that have been submitted today, so we'll work through those. The first question is from Steve Galena from Warborough. My first question relates to council continuing to illegally drain stormwater via an unregistered easement drain through Lot 2 Kimberley Drive, Warborough, without a discharge point, where council had previously advised. On several occasions, it was finalised in its negotiations with the property owner, only to further advise us that negotiations are unlikely to occur now. Question: if council are not going to install stage 2 as originally planned for, then what is it planning to do to finally resolve the documented flooding of Lot 2, Lot 3 and the ponding of water in the table drain fronting Lot 38 Kimberley Drive and Sunrise Highway Reserve in vicinity of lots 2 and 3 that attracts mosquitoes. I'll throw to Mr. Gowans, Douglas Gowans, to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Gleaner, for your first question. The premise in the introduction to your first question is incorrect that you state that stormwater is illegally drained through private property. Council's position is that there is an implied easement through Lot 2 at Kimberley Drive, Warborough, which has been implied since the time of subdivision. Therefore, under common law, as it currently stands, there is no legal need to formally resolve the drainage of water through Lot 2 Kimberley Drive. In respect to the concern of ponding of water, inspections have confirmed that water is draining from table drains as intended, but may from time to time hold water following a rain event. This is no different to any table drain across the Shire. Therefore, it is not Council's intention to take any further action at this time. We will commit to monitoring whether water is draining as intended through our regular road management plan inspections.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Mr. Gleaner has submitted a second question. My second question relates to the continued narrowing and obstruction of the usable road pavement widths to both a lesser and greater degree within Mark Street, Kimberley Drive and Wilcar Drive, Warborough, rural living zone that has been known, communicated to Council to have been inundated with property stormwater and sediment runoff with street cross flow for many years, as documented by me within my Facebook page, Warborough Heights Information by Stephen Gleaner. Question, will Council at least act on the recommendation suggested of Councillor David Clark within his customer action request in grading back these narrowed roads communicated and displayed to him during a site meeting where I demonstrated at least 400 millimetres narrowing of Wilcar Drive that is now closer to at least 800 millimetre in sections approaching a bend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again, Mr. Gleaner, for your second question. In response to your second question, Council in the last few weeks has undertaken a reseal of the pavement within Warborough Estate as part of its resealing program. Prior to the reseal, grass on the edges of the pavement was sprayed. Council officers continue to monitor the condition of grass invasion of the pavement and will treat accordingly. It is worth noting that even if grass verges intrude into the pavement still performs the task of supporting vehicle traffic. Regular grading back of the grass can cause damage to the sealed pavement.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. I now move on to a second round of questions and submitted by Trevor Davey from Waterloo. Question, COVID-19 impacts are extensive. With that in mind and the large funds spent by the state government creating a huge deficit, does the Council see a reduction in the available grants received in past years in 2020 and 2021? And I'll ask Mr. Jim Nolan to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Mr. Davey for his question. The Council in its 2020-2021 budget provides for about $23 million revenue needed to deliver the range of services and capital projects that it does. Of the $23 million, approximately $13 million is raised through a combination of rates, waste charges, wind farm revenue and user fees and charges. The remaining $10 million revenue is from state 24% and Commonwealth 76% grants. The more significant grants include the federal assistance grants, which is about $5.7 million, Roads to Recovery, which is about $1.4 million, and other grants include funding to support the Commonwealth Home Support Program, maternal and child health, libraries, etc. In addition to these ongoing annual grants, Council receives funding for one-off projects such as the Lexington Community Hub, Snake Valley Skate Park and the Activate Avoca project, or in response to identified community needs such as the Commonwealth Drought Communities Program, of which Council received $2 million. Small councils which are so heavily reliant on government grants to deliver works and services are exposed in the event of reduced government funding. At this point in time, there is no indication that the main recurrent funding programs will be reduced. However, there have been occurrences in the past where this has occurred. For example, the freezing of the indexation of the Federal Assistance Grants program previously, which resulted in several $100,000 in reduced revenue to council. And there's always a risk of reduced revenues in future, which highlights the need for council through our peak bodies such as the MAV, Rural Councils Victoria, or ALGA, the national peak body, to continue to advocate for funding of councils in the longer term and beyond the current COVID-19 recovery environment, where stimulus funding has currently been provided in the short term.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Mr. Davey has submitted a second question. Revenue for council is critical. Therefore, is there thought that in the future to recruit a building surveyor and commence doing building permits again? The revenue would outweigh the cost of a person, I think. I might throw to Mr. Douglas Gowans for that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Davey, for your second question. Up until mid-2018, council had a building surveying service that, as a component of the role, was able to assess and issue building permits. This service was shared between Ararat Rural City and Pyrenees Shire Council. The building practitioner retired and both councils were unable to secure a building practitioner that was prepared to provide a shared service and issue permits. Council is obliged to engage a building surveyor in line with the Building Act 1993 to fulfil the requirement of the role of municipal building surveyor. The role administers and enforces parts of the Building Act and regulations. The role is required to have the capability to issue emergency orders, place of public entertainment permits and essential safety measures, to name a few. Council currently provides this service through a contractor. Market forces have meant that there is a shortage of qualified building practitioners in rural areas. Those who are qualified are more attracted to issue permits from their own private business than for working for a local government authority. It is worth noting that council has not previously sought to fully recover costs from the issuing of building permits, but subsidise the service of issuing building permits. Council does have the power to set its own fees. Full cost recovery would most likely result in council not being any more cost competitive than private practitioners. Unfortunately, it's highly likely to be a moot point, as attracting a qualified building surveyor to issue permits is very difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Move on to some additional questions which all relate to similar items. So I might just ask the question and we might respond as we go through so we don't get out of line. The first question is from Belinda Fairman from Warborough. Question 1, could council please explain why has PA 2932-20 been allowed to go from 20 greyhound originally to 8 greyhounds to 28 greyhounds with no official amendments to the planning application and no time of opportunity for community objectives to address the changes in an official capacity? I might ask Mr. Gowans if you could respond to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Fairman, for your question. I must open with that council officer's recommendation to council on this item tonight. This item is before council tonight, and normally I wouldn't answer a question directly relating to an item that is before council, but there is actually an important point to be made here, in that there is, even though the officer recommendation recommends in its opening line that that it seeks to provide a permit for 8 dogs in the particular permit application, in the body of the conditions, condition number 11 does have an administrative error where 20 puppies is mentioned. It's fair to say that's an administration error and shouldn't be in there. And if council were to consider this issue tonight, it would be the officer's recommendation to remove any reference to puppies and just leave it at 8 dogs in condition 11, even though the front end of the recommendation clearly states that the permit is for 8 dogs. So I do apologise for any concern that particular administrative error has caused.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans.
And subsequently, sorry, in terms of after the at the mediation, the applicant did make it clear that they were going to put a revised planning application in to only have 8 dogs. So it was part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Belinda Feynman's offered a second question. Objectors received tonight's agenda yesterday. Does council believe that is sufficient notice to change the application to significantly from 20 greyhounds to 28 greyhounds, giving objectors no voice on such a major change?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you for the subsequent question. I think I've answered that predominantly in the first question. However, I would state that the council's agenda does go up 3 full days before the council meeting. So it was online on the Friday. I do understand that some people may not have been made aware of that until very recently. And my understanding is also that objections were notified that the agenda would be online on Friday, last Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. The next questions are from Julie Hendricks of Warborough. Question 1. Does council think that other residents might have benefited from this new information and major change to PA 2932-20 of increasing greyhounds? Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you, Ms. Hendricks, for your question. Again, I think this has predominantly been answered in my previous answer, in that really there is no major change from what was presented at the mediation.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Julie Hendricks has supplied a subsequent question. Could council please explain the thinking behind, if this were to go through tonight, why one new resident's desires that could potentially cause departments of council no end of grief? Is this more important than the needs, lives and peace of many of your residents? Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, thank you for this question, Ms. Hendricks. Council is has the Pyrenees planning scheme, and there is opportunities for objectors to have their say and voice their concerns. And our belief is that that has occurred in this particular case. It is part of a state government framework for how planning permits are considered. Planning applications are considered, and there is, if council were to consider this tonight, if they do decide to support the officer recommendation tonight, there is still an opportunity for the objectors to appeal any decision, and also for the applicant to appeal any decision, whether for or against or the conditions. So there are mechanisms that are in place that provide a fair and equitable way for people who are concerned and wish to object to a planning permit.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. The next set of questions are from Connie Gardner of Warborough. Question 1. The original application viewed by the community clearly states that approved measure setbacks are not met in 4 instances by up to 33 metres deficit. Could council please explain how and why are council processes disregarding regulations made to protect residents and hence working against its residents? Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Gardner, for your question. This question really goes to the application itself that's before council. So I do wish to take that one on notice, and it may be answered in my presentation to council or any questions from council in the presentation of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Connie Gardner has submitted a subsequent question. PA 2932 32/20 refers to the need to adhere to guidelines for noise in industries in regional Victoria. NIRV guidelines state the maximum decibel limits are 45 during the day, 38 in the evening, and 33 at night. One greyhound-sized barking dog measures between 80 to 122 decibels. How does Council envisage achieving ongoing compliance regarding impossible to achieve ongoing noise levels should it pass PA 2932/20 to protect the emotional and mental health of its residents? What is the enforcement action mentioned in tonight's agenda? Mr. Gowns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, thank you, Ms. Gardner, for your subsequent question. Again, this issue goes to any potential conditions that might be put on this application if it was passed by council, and there are very strict guidelines around how noise is monitored, enforced, and restricted, both from GRV and from the EPA.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. The next round of questions are from Steve Stewart from Warborough. Question 1, could Council please speak to the way in which PA 2932/20 has been handled, where communication has been inadequate to fully inform all relevant residents? Information received has at times been too late for action, and the lack of adequate consultation, especially considering this application is controversial and extremely unpopular with many surrounding residents and already causing much stress and heartache. Mr. Gowns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your question. Council has followed all due processes in assessing and providing notification for this application. And as I've mentioned earlier in my responses, there are mechanisms in place to appeal and for council to consider all the objections that have been made and take them into consideration in whether it chooses to support the officer recommendation. And there are mechanisms that are available if the objectors still feel that their concerns haven't been met and feel that there is a way that they can be appealed, and that process is through the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. I have another subsequent question from Mr. Stewart. Question 2. Tonight's agenda states that Council doesn't consider commercial advantage for the objector. Could Council please explain how the very likely devaluing of your residents' homes, their nest eggs, be considered a commercial advantage for the many objectors of this application? Mr. Gowns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your subsequent question. As stated in the report, and which I will present to Council tonight, there are only certain things in planning applications by law that are allowed to be considered, and property devaluation is definitely not one of those.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. I have another question from Lawrence Lansuki from Warborough. Question 1. Have the council members that are voting on PA 2932/20 tonight been sufficiently informed of all the negative aspects to such a proposal and the strong opposition of all the objectors, so that they may fully appreciate how they would feel about 28 greyhounds and an abundance of steel fences moving in next to their home? Mr. Gowns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lankuchi, for your question. This question is really directed about whether council members have been informed, and look, I won't. I know I can say that councillors have been briefed on this, but I'll leave that to councillors to determine whether they've received all the information that they need to.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. That concludes our questions for this evening. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the members of the community and the residents for taking the time to submit those questions. It is important, and we're very pleased to respond to those questions, if not on the night, at an earliest available opportunity. So we'll move on to the items for noting. Item 10, I take it that the councillors have read those items for noting. Is there any questions in relation to those items for noting? If that's the case, could I...
I'm happy to move, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the noting of those items.
Yep, moved by Councillor Clark. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Vance. All those in favour? Thank you. Moved. We move on to the items for decision. So we have a economic development and tourism, 13.1, the sponsorship request for Evoca races. I'll throw to you, Mr Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council will be aware that it considered a report on the matter of sponsorship for the Evoca races prior to moving into caretaker period, and wasn't able to provide sponsorship for that event because the event was to take place during caretaker period, and the election caretaker period policy provides that council could not, was prohibited from doing so. So this report has come back to council to consider ongoing further support for this event, which provides for a stimulus for the economy in drawing visitors to the region. So council does have a budget to provide sponsorship for events, and this recommendation is for that council approved sponsorship for the Evoca Shire Turf Club race events for an amount of 2,500 plus GST per annum over a 3-year period.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. We have a recommendation there, councillors. Does anyone like
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr Chair.
Moved by Councillor Vance. We have a seconder. Councillor Eason. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on the item?
It's been a past tradition that council have supported the Evoca Shire Turf Club over the years. It brings a great deal of tourism and business into the town over that weekend. It was unfortunate that during COVID, life has changed dramatically for everybody, but I'm more than happy to support the Turf Club into the future. Thank you.
Councillor Easton, would you like to speak? Any other councillors like to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. We move to 13.2, asset and development, services planning and development. 13.2 is the PA 2932-20, dog keeping and retraining at Warburton. That's we received a number of questions in public participation time. So, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report, and before I jump into this report, I do wish to again highlight that the officer report does contain an error in the conditions, and that this genuinely is for 8 dogs on the particular property and no more. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with information that is relevant to making a determination on planning permit application PA 2932-20 for the use and development of land for racing dog husbandry for 8 dogs at 96 Wheelcar Drive, Warborough. The applicant proposes to provide behavioural training to racing dogs for the purpose of rehabilitating and rehoming the animals at the completion of their racing careers. The application does not seek to undertake or provide facilities that allow for training of dogs for racing purposes. The application originally sought permission to keep and train 20 dogs. Following the mediation meeting, the application was amended to reduce the number of dogs to 8. Notice was sent to 62 adjoining landowners within a 500-metre radius of the site. 10 submissions were received and are summarised within the report. The grounds of the submissions were impact on amenity, suitability of the rural living zone for this particular application, desecration of the tranquility of the area, limits the ability of surrounding landowners to attract potential buyers, the property is too small, more dogs will stir up noise in the neighbourhood, not appropriate use of land, distance of existing dwellings to exercise and spelling yards, setting a precedence for this type of use in the area, devalues neighbourhood properties, concern around composting and waste facilities, application does not comply with the setbacks, increased traffic and impact of the livability of the area. All of these submissions were taken into account and responded to in the body of the report. The rural living zone of Waubra includes a range of lot sizes, residential uses and established agricultural activities. These include keeping and training of horses and sheep grazing. The addition of racing dog husbandry at the proposed facility scale, 8 dogs, and I do use the term racing dog husbandry as that is the terminology used within the Pyrenees planning scheme to describe the use, will not provide any further impact, particularly when the activity is strictly regulated by relevant codes of practice, planning requirements and EPA regulations for noise, odour and wastewater treatment. The application meets the required objectives of the incorporated document of the Pyrenees planning scheme, which outlines the specifications for managing, keeping and monitoring of racing dogs and to reduce amenity impacts on adjoining land uses. The use of land for racing dog husbandry is not incompatible with the rural environment, and as such, amenity conflicts must be reasonably tolerated given the land is located within a zone which provides for residential use in a rural environment and the site's setting. State policy allows for this activity, particularly when it is appropriately located and does not detrimentally impact the environment, operation of surrounding land uses, and amenity of the surrounding area. The proposed use and development accords with the objectives of the Pyrenees planning scheme, specifically the rural living zone, and can be suitably accommodated upon the subject site through the application of planning permit conditions and the requirement to comply with the industry code of conduct and other legislative obligations. Therefore, it is the officer recommendation that Council, having considered all matters required under Section 60 of the Planning Environment Act 1987 and the provision of the Pyrenees Planning Scheme, determines to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit under the provisions of the Pyrenees Planning Scheme for the use and development of land for racing dog husbandry for 8 dogs at Lot 13 on plan of subdivision 125867, 96 Wilcar Drive, Waubra, subject to conditions. And I must note, I won't go through all the conditions. The conditions include things such as a site management plan, limitations on the number and breed of dogs. And again, I point to the fact that it is only 8 dogs and the 20 puppies needs to be removed administratively. Fencing requirements, dog control and containment, maintenance of facilities, waste management plans, the general amenity and air quality and noise, just to name a few.
Councillor Easton.
Mr Mayor, I believe we've done everything to the letter of the law with regards to this permit, but I think the questioners earlier have made the point that they believe they haven't been able to get their point across to council. So I recommend we put this on the table, have a chance to meet with the objectors and the applicant if he wishes, between now and the next meeting of council.
Mr. Chair, you take that as a motion to lay the matter on the table, in which case you need a seconder.
Do we have a, is that it? The motion, we have a seconder? Councillor Clark? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, the motion is to be put. The governance rules for meeting procedure doesn't provide for debate on a procedural motion of this nature. So it's a matter of voting on the motion.
Okay, so we have a nominator and a seconder. So all those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Carry that over. 13.3, PA 2960-20, single dwelling at Mina Park. Throw to you again, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with information that is relevant to making a determination on planning permit application PA 2960/20 for the use and development of a single dwelling at Lot 1, Beaufort Carnham Road, Mina Park. The site falls within the farming zone, and the proposed use and development is subject to a planning permit in accordance with Clause 3507 of the Pyrenees Planning Scheme, which specifically requires that the development of all dwellings on lots less than 80 hectares must be treated as a Section 2 use. The site is currently clear of any buildings or structures and is currently fenced for stock. All lots surrounding the site are zoned for farming and currently used for a range of agricultural activities or associated uses. State and local planning policy emphasises the importance of protecting viable agricultural land from fragmentation and dispersed urban activities. It also seeks to ensure that agricultural and productive rural land activities are managed for long-term sustainable outcomes while supporting and encouraging the diversification of the agricultural base. In instances where lots are less than 80 hectares, such as this matter, the farming zone allows for permit applications to be made. However, the application must demonstrate how the proposed use and development meets the objectives of the zone. In the case of this application, the applicant has not satisfactorily addressed the relevant decision guidelines. The planning policy framework does not support the application for the use and development of a single dwelling, as it would produce planning outcomes that are inconsistent with the objectives and strategies of the Pyrenees Planning Scheme. And the officer recommendation reflects this position.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Have we got someone to nominate that? Councillor Easton, we got a seconder? Councillor Clark? Councillor Easton, would you like to speak on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In these matters, we rely heavily on the planning scheme and the state government requirements to make these determinations. The staff go through these requirements diligently and have shown in this how this property is not within the means of a farming zone for residential purposes. I support the motion. I support the recommendation of the officers.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Easton, I think this is an unusual use, although if you actually visit the site, you will see that there are 3 other properties in reasonably close proximity, but all of those have reasonable land holdings that allow an agricultural use. My understanding is that this block being around half a hectare, by the time one puts a house and a septic on it, effectively will probably leave about a quarter, or probably maybe even less than a quarter available for something like that. So that would make it really quite difficult to use it. The concern I had in viewing this was, does it actually limit the landholder in the context of what can they do with the block? But in discussions this afternoon, there are a range of uses, because it certainly can be developed if it is developed in conjunction with other rural land, i.e. it could be developed for a house for a farming property, but that would allow council to create some sort of 173 agreement over that property. So it certainly doesn't limit the owner. It maybe narrows the owner's options, but it certainly doesn't limit the owner in terms of what they can do with this in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 13.4, which is PA 2984/20, single dwelling camping caravan park Lamplugh. I'll throw to you, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide council with information that is relevant to deciding on planning permit application PA 2984/20 for the use and development of land for single dwelling, camping and caravan park cabins associated buildings at Sunraysia Highway, Lamplugh, at Lot 7 along Sunraysia Highway. The applicant intends to deliver a staged project that will include the establishment of a garlic and lavender farm with sheep grazing, a new 2-bedroom dwelling, domestic shed and 3 accommodation cabins. The land is subject to the farming zone and restructure overlay, and the area of the land is just over 10 hectares. Notice was sent to 9 adjoining landowners directly abutting the site. 2 submissions were received and are summarised in the report. And the issues that were raised included loss of appeal to potential future buyers. The submitter's dog may bark due to increased activity on neighbouring site. Perceived loss of view. Concerns that the use of Mitchell Road will have an impact on the condition of the road. And concern that proposed sheep grazing will be noisy and smelling. The submission 2 had also some concerns, and the first of those was a concern that dogs kept at or visiting the subject site may chase sheep through fences onto roads and maul neighbouring stock. Also that there is a bushfire hazard with campfires and open cooking facilities associated with a caravan and camping park, and the possible use of a neighbouring dam water for firefighting efforts. Also that transient seasonal workers, gold detectors that enter private property, excavation danger to livestock, and potentially the increased activity of thieves and rustlers. There was also a concern about traffic management along the Sunraysia Highway only being a single lane with high volumes of trucks, harvesters, and there was a concern with egress and ingress into the site. All those issues were taken into account by the planning team and addressed within the body of this report. It's fair to say that it was the office's opinion that those particular issues can be addressed through conditions, and some of them actually aren't relevant, including the devaluation. The proposed use and development provides for the use of land for agriculture and ensures that non-agricultural uses do not adversely affect the use of land in accordance with the zone. Further, the proposed use and development will support and enhance sustainable agricultural production at the site. The proposed use and development has been assessed as a camping and caravan park in accordance with the planning scheme due to the land use definitions and the way in which the scheme describes and categorises certain activities. However, the accommodation elements of the proposed use are limited to 3 tourist accommodation cabins. It is the assessing officer's opinion that the proposed use and development is a good planning outcome for the Shire, as it will enhance agricultural productivity and diversity and tourism. And the officer recommendation has a range of standard conditions as listed in the report. And it's the council officer's opinion that council, having considered all the matters required, determines to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit under the provisions of the planning scheme with the conditions listed.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Councillor Clark. Got a seconder. Councillor Eason. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great little application for the northern end of our shire. Again, in contrast to the previous one where they've got a bit of space, they've demonstrated a clear intent to do an agricultural use in this sense. And I would also hope in given its situation, it's just a little bit north of St Ignatius Winery, a little bit south of Avoca Farm Stay. It would be really a lovely little complement, a beautiful bit of lavender, would be a lovely little complement to the tourism product that we have in the north end of the Shire. So very happy for it to have my support, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Easton? Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. We move to 13.5, Beaufort Rotary Club service sign proposal. I think that's with you, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with information regarding a signage installation project that has been proposed by the Rotary Club of Beaufort, and to seek confirmation that Council will give further consideration to the final design and placement of the proposed signage following the confirmation of design. Council has received an application seeking consent to install 2 new service club signage boards at the eastern and western entrances of Beaufort. The proposed sign design features an art easel, and the proposed sign is quite large, being 4.6 metres high and 3.6 metres wide, and would replace the 2 existing service club signage structures. The design also features the text Beaufort, the Art of the Pyrenees, and proposes to advertise a range of clubs and organisations that operate within Beaufort. Funding for the project has been provided by substantially by the Beaufort Bendigo Bank, Community Bank. Council has been working with Rotary to support an improved design that demonstrates a high quality, professionally designed product that has a positive visual impact on Beaufort's town entrances. Rotary have expressed a commitment to the original signage design and are eager to progress communication of the concept to the broader community. Despite the sign being intended to advertise and promote service clubs, the proposed text implies linkages to other groups and interests within the Beaufort Township and broader municipality. It is important to ensure that the advertising text and slogans do not impact other groups and organisations or falsely imply ownership over unrelated activities. Council has engaged a graphic design company to facilitate the development of an improved signage concept that gives regard to the following elements: the layout, including the even and consistent representation of participating service clubs, text selection and placement, design appropriateness to site and surrounding context. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council acknowledges the efforts of the Beaufort Rotary Club in seeking funding to replace the service club signage at Beaufort's town entrances, supports officers to continue working with Beaufort Rotary Club to refine the design to address the key issues raised in this report, supports officers to develop a working relationship with funding bodies, including the Beaufort Community Bank, to ensure that landowner manager consent becomes a criteria requirement of any future funding applications, and requires officers to bring a further report to Council seeking endorsement of the location and design of the new service club sign within the public realm, subject to recommendation 2.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Would anyone like to move that?
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Vance, seconder. Councillor Keogh. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on that?
No, I think it's very well worded, and if I'm sure that council staff work with they can come up. And the more we promote our region, the better we are.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Keogh.
Just to second that again, and to we've got such a great club in the Rotary Club and the other clubs and organisations that they're representing in this signage. So it's a great thing, but we just want to make sure it's correct, and it'll look great when people are entering Beaufort. So, yeah, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Any other councillors wish to speak on that? No. All those in favour? Thank you. We'll move on to the next item. 13.6, complaints procedure, nuisance and wind farms. Mr. Gowans, is with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's adoption of a wind farm noise complaint management procedure. Due to the number of wind farm projects within the Shire, it is in the interest of Council and the community to have a confirmed and consistent approach to the way in which Council responds to the complaints received regarding wind farms. Complaints relating to wind energy facilities are typically investigated in accordance with either the Public Health and Wellbeing Act 2008 or the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Often this relates to planning permit condition breaches or concerns. Policies have been prepared to provide clear understanding to all interested parties on how Council will respond to complaints relating to wind energy facilities. The policies clarify the roles and responsibilities of complainants, proponents, operators and Council officers, whilst having regard to relevant legislation. The Environment Protection Act 2017, which is expected to come into effect on 1st of July 2021, introduces the new General Environment Duty and the unreasonable noise provisions, which will apply to wind energy facility operators. The EPA will be responsible for enforcement of these provisions, and as such, the procedures proposed in this report will be amended accordingly. The wind farm complaint management procedure should be adopted to support Council officers in responding to complaints and to provide process clarity to the community, complainants, proponents and operators. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council adopts the wind farm complaints management procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Councillor Keogh, you move that. You have a seconder. Councillor Easton. Councillor Keogh, would you like to speak on that?
Just that it is thoroughly important, and we know from the history of other wind farms and an understanding that we're able to have a procedure that our residents are able to follow and clearly understand, if they are adversely affected. So thank you for the team for alerting us to this part of that process. Thank you.
Councillor Easton, would you like to speak on that?
Again, I think this is an important document that avails our ratepayers and residents the opportunity to investigate and come up with the answers we need for them.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that item?
Actually,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question of Mr. Gowans, if I could, please. Although we do talk quite regularly about noise because it is the most frequently complained about issue in the context of wind farm, this is also a fairly encompassing broad policy that really deals with all our responsibilities, which is really quite strange because we are not the permit. We don't make the permits. We are effectively the administrative person that has to deal with the complaints on behalf of the state. And that's the general purpose of this, isn't it, Mr. Gowans? It's certainly just broader than noise, isn't it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clark. That is correct. That there can be a whole range of issues that arise relating to wind farms. Any of the planning permit issues, in someone's eyes, may have an adverse impact on the surrounding landholders, and we need a clear policy that and procedure to be able to deal with a whole range of those issues. Council also has existing nuisance complaint procedures that account for a whole range of other nuisance complaints, but it was felt that we needed to have a specific policy for wind farms, as they are large infrastructure items that do receive complaints from time to time.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans.
Question of Mr. Gowans. As I understand it, we set the process in place, but it's not our responsibility to resolve these issues. It is still the authority, the state government is the authority that resolves the issues. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Vance. Technically, the planning permit, or many of the planning permits that we have relating to wind farms, does have council as the authority set to investigate issues. As you'd be aware, most wind farms are actually approved by the state government, but council still has responsibility for its component where it's listed as the responsible authority when it comes to certain complaints and certain planning permit conditions. Ultimately, the issues that arise with wind farms really need the wind farm operator and the complainant to come to an agreement around how to resolve issues. Council has a role, but ultimately that's where the answer lies in how those two parties can come together and reach agreement.
And in the case of where they don't come to an agreement, who's the umpire?
Yeah, look, that's a very tricky question, Councillor, because ultimately there may be dissatisfaction when it comes to complaints, and council will do everything where it's got the approved power to investigate or be responsible for a complaint to try and achieve an outcome. But there are some issues that may be beyond council's remit.
Councillor Keogh.
Sorry, actually, this was my first question, but I was very happy to move this. Just a notice, I do believe it's an interest held in common, but I just wanted for the record to say that I do live near the Stockyard Hill one. This is a procedural matter, but I just wanted that noted in this report. Thank you. So, again, it's procedural, but just for transparency. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Councillor Easton, have you got anything you'd like to say on this item? No. So all those in favour? Thank you. Then we'll move on to Asset and Development Services. Item 13.7, crossover road excavation permit fees. Back to you, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to assess the current charges associated with new crossovers, installations or major works within a road reserve and consider whether to have a single standard fee regardless of the road speed limit. It was brought to council's attention earlier this year that some community members had raised concerns with the fees associated with crossover permits. A crossover permit is typically for the installation of a driveway in the road reserve managed by council. The intention is to ensure that through inspections and approval of any design plans, that any new construction complies with the infrastructure design manual and does not have an adverse impact on roadside drainage, native vegetation or roadside safety. Council currently utilises fees set by the state government and are shown in the road management regulations. Currently, there are different fees for crossover road excavation permits depending upon the speed limit that applies to the locality. Currently, for works with a speed limit greater than 50 kilometres, the fee associated is $638.31, and for works in a 50 kilometre zone, the fee is $348.04. The differential fees are to cover the cost of inspections and officer time associated with assessing an application for a crossover permit. There are additional considerations to assess in higher speed zones to ensure the safety of road users. However, considering the concerns that have been raised regarding the cost of fees, council officers are prepared to put forward an internal recommendation that the lower fee apply in all circumstances. There are some circumstances where multiple crossovers may be requested. Council officers currently use their discretion to assess whether multiple crossovers are in close proximity and that only one fee would apply in that particular case. It's important that crossover permits are utilised by the community to ensure appropriate crossovers are put in place and to ensure the safety of all road users. Fees associated with permit applications should reflect the officer time involved to undertake the assessment. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that Council adopts a single fee for major works in road reserve for any given speed limit, being the lower fee listed in the road management regulations of 23.5 fee units, which currently equals $348.04 in total.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. We have a recommendation there, councillors. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Easton, have we got a seconder? Councillor Vance. Councillor Easton, would you like to speak on that?
I'd like to commend the officers for putting forward a proposal that actually reduces something for our ratepayers. Congratulations.
Councillor Vance. Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. Corporate and Community Services, item 13.8, Quarterly Finance Report, July to September 2020. I think this is with you, Ms. Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Quarterly Finance Report. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update of the operating and capital financial performance for the 3 months from the 1st of July to the 30th of September 2020. The report compares the current budget against year-to-date actuals for each operating programme and for all capital works in the current financial year to date. Council adopted the budget for the 2020-21 financial year at its meeting on the 21st of July 2020. And Council at the 15th of September meeting approved the carryover of certain projects that remained incomplete as at the 30th of June. Council also endorsed the funding of $555,000 in projects from the working capital surplus during this meeting. These projects have now been added to the original budget amounts to form the amended budget. In addition to those projects, Council has also been notified of successful grant applications for a range of fully funded projects which were not included in Council's 2021 budget, but have since been incorporated into the amended budget. And those additional fundings are listed in the report. The report does provide a greater detail of financial information year to date that I will take as read by councillors. But cash and investments as at the 30th of September 2020 totalled 11.72 million, which includes 2.4 million for the long service leave and annual leave provisions. At this stage of the financial year, Council's overall financial result as at the end of the financial year is projected to be a net working capital surplus of $556,000. And it's the officer's recommendation that Council receives the finance report for the first quarter of 2020-21.
Councillors, we have a recommendation there, moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just simply to thank Ms. Bramwell for the report, and to just note that in the time that we councillors have been off the scene, we've achieved another $2 million in grants that we hadn't budgeted for, and maybe we might nick off the scene again till Christmas and see if we could double that. That would be just lovely.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh?
No, happy with that. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? No? All those in favour? Thank you. We'll move to 13.9, Councillor Remuneration. Again with you, Ms. Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the setting of councillor allowances for the next 4 years. The Local Government Act 2020 provides that mayors and councillors are entitled to receive an allowance while performing their duty as an elected official. And the Victorian Government sets the upper and lower limits for allowances paid to councillors. And despite the repeal of the relevant sections of the Local Government Act 1989, this section continues to apply in respect of allowances payable to mayors and councillors until the first determination is made by the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal, which has not yet been made. Councils are required to review allowance levels by the 30th of June in the year following a general election, and the allowance level determined remains in effect for the full term of the council. Allowance levels are subject to annual automatic adjustments that are announced in the Victorian Government Gazette. Councils are divided into three categories based on the income and population of each council, and the Pyrenees Shire Council is Category 1 council. In addition to the annual allowances, it should be noted that councillors do remain entitled to be reimbursed for any necessary out-of-pocket expenses that they incur while performing their duties as a councillor, and allowances are also subject to the 9.5% superannuation guarantee. Following the 2020 local government general election in October, it is now appropriate for council to review its allowances for the next 4 years. This review will consist of council setting an in-principle position on the level of allowances to be paid. Council will then invite public consultation under Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 on the proposed level of allowances to be paid. At the end of the public consultation period, which must be a minimum of 28 days, Council will meet to hear any person who wishes to address Council on this matter and also to consider any written submissions. Council will then formally adopt its level of allowances for the next 4 years. It is proposed that submissions on allowances be considered at Council's February meeting, and after considering any submissions, Council will then adopt allowances for the next 4 years. Currently, Pyrenees Shire Mayor and Councillors' allowances are made at the maximum allowable for a Category 1 council, with a councillor being paid $21,049 per annum and a mayor $62,884 per annum, plus 9.5% superannuation. Allowance levels are subject to annual reviews undertaken by the Minister for Local Government, and the Minister has conducted this review and has determined that this year no adjustments to allowances will be made in respect of all councils. Councils will therefore continue to pay mayors and councillors the same allowance amounts that applied prior to the recent general election. It is therefore recommended that Council, in principle, resolves that council allowances for the term of the new council remain as in place before the general election, and as is noted in the recommendation, and that gives notice pursuant to Section 223 of the level of allowances to be paid and request public submissions, and that submissions be received up until Friday the 15th of January, providing additional time for the holiday period. At its first briefing scheduled in February 2021, Council will hear any submissions requested to be provided in person and consider submissions provided in writing. And at its ordinary Council meeting in February 2021, will resolve to adopt, with or without amendments, council allowances for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. Councillors have a recommendation before you. Would anyone like to move that? Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on that?
I think under the circumstances that we've just come through, it'd be very goodwill on behalf of the councillors to hold their remuneration at the current level, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Clark.
Just to support Councillor Vance's comments, thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Any other councillors which wish to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. Item 13.10, unused road not required for public use. Ms Bramwell again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider making a determination that a section of Government Road in the township of Beaufort is not considered to be required for public traffic and is an unused road. Council received a request from a property owner seeking that Council gives notice to the Secretary of the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, advising that the section of unused Government Road northeast of Crown Allotment 73B in the parish of Torwalla is not required for public traffic and is unused in accordance with Section 400 of the Land Act 1958. The landowner has made an application to the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning to licence the described portion of road in accordance with Section 138 of the Land Act for the purposes of conservation. Before the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning can enter into a licence agreement over the described land, Council must have first provided notice that the road is not required for public traffic and is unused. The portion of road is not currently on Council's road register and is not made or maintained. The intent to licence was advertised in the Pyrenees Advocate public notices on the 14th of August 2020. The management responsibility that currently rests with Council will be transferred to the applicant at such time as the licence under Section 138 of the Land Act is issued. It is therefore the officer's recommendation that Council authorises Council officers to give notice to the Secretary of the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, advising that the section of unused government road, northeast of Crown Allotment 73B in the parish of Trawalla, is not required for public traffic and is unused, in accordance with Section 400 of the Land Act 1958. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. Councillors, we have a recommendation before you there. Councillor Eason. Seconder, Councillor Keogh. Councillor Eason, would you like to speak on that item?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Keogh. Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? No. All those in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 13.11, Pyrenees Shire Council 2019-2020 Annual Report. Again to you, Ms Bramwell, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to receive the draft annual report for 2019-20. The 2019-20 annual report has been prepared in accordance with Section 98 of the Local Government Act 2020 and details the operational and financial activities of Council throughout the financial year. The annual report provides useful information to the community on Council's operation for the financial year, including its achievements and challenges. And the financial statements and performance statement for the 2019-20 financial year were provided to Council at their meeting in September, prior to the general election. An end-of-year financial year progress report against the Council plan was also provided to Council at the same meeting, content of which is included as part of Council's annual report. The development of the annual report was delayed in 2020 and the report is in its final stages of preparation. A copy of the final proof document is provided to Council under separate cover and will be published on Council's website by the end of November. Due to COVID, the government did extend the normal deadline of the 30th of September to the 30th of November in 2020. As the opening statements in the annual report indicate, 2019 has been a year of extreme change. A new Local Government Act was enacted. Recycling uncertainties and changes occurred progressively throughout the year. Bushfires in the Lexington area in December and January, significant impact on our community. The COVID-19 pandemic beginning in March 2020, which continues to impact us all, are just some of the change that we've had to manage during the year. But notwithstanding the challenges, 2019-20 saw some highlights in many different focus areas, which are a few of which are listed within the body of the report. When the final document is published, the community will be advised by public notice that the annual report has been prepared and copies will be available through the Council's website and hard copies at Council's front counters. It's the officer's recommendation, therefore, that Council receives the Pyrenees Shire annual report for 2019-20. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. It certainly has been a challenging year and continues to be so in many ways. Anyway, councillors, we have a recommendation before you. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Keogh. Seconder. Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh, would you like to speak on that?
Only to quickly thank everyone involved in that, so thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. And again, it will be salutary reading later on, and it might well be reading for your grandkids Tanya, you having been the mayor through it, to tell them what you went through this year.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? All those in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 13.12. The Beaufort Golf Club requests for council to enter into a guarantee agreement with the Bendigo Bank. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council has received a request from the Beaufort Golf Club Incorporated for council to enter into a guarantee agreement with the Bendigo Bank in respect of a loan that they propose to take up for the construction of a synthetic bowls green on their site. Council was briefed on this matter at a briefing last Tuesday, and again received a delegation from the golf club this evening. The estimated total cost of the project is $275,000 to be funded by the loan. The club has negotiated and not yet signed a sponsorship agreement with Stockyard Hill Wind Farm Proprietary Limited under the Community Investment Program for a grant of $270,000 in sponsorship, proposed to be paid to the club in 7 annual instalments from April 2023 and conclude in April 2029. The club, having negotiated the sponsorship under the Stockyard Hill Community Investment Program, had sought to have the project initiated and funded via loan from the Community Bank, which requires a guarantee agreement to be entered into with council to secure the loan. Now, the club is to be congratulated on being able to secure a loan from Stockyard Hill Wind Farm, and the project is consistent with council's recreation strategy to increase participation in sport. In considering the merits of council's agreements to be a guarantor for the loan, council needs to consider the relevant risks associated with that, and the risks effectively include the potential for the golf club to default on the loan through becoming unfinancial and or winding up. Now, in that event, the club, as an incorporated association, does have rules of incorporation which include provision for the assets or the property of the club to be transferred to an equivalent entity. In other words, to secure the assets for public use ongoing. Notwithstanding that, council may have some need to ensure that there are adequate provisions to ensure that the loan is paid out in full, both by the club and through the securing of the commitment by Stockyard Hill Wind for the wind farm for the total of the grant. So there is a recommendation, council, that council provides an in-principle support for the request by the Beaufort Golf Club for council to enter into a guarantee agreement with the Bendigo Bank for a loan for the construction of a synthetic bowls green, and that council authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate the details of the agreement and to sign the agreement, and that the outcome of the negotiation be reported back to a future meeting of council.
Councillor Clark.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative recommendation, if I could, please. I'm not sure whether Mr. Nolan or Ms. Brownell, you have the opportunity to put that up for the other councillors who won't have seen it. Or whether Jane does. I'm certainly happy to talk to it if no one has, if that's not possible. Provided I get a seconder, of course, which I don't know what it is.
Got a seconder for that alternative recommendation?
I can share the screen if you'd like.
Thank you, Jane.
Mr. Mayor, I might just at this point in time alert you to the fact that
We've dropped out a couple of councillors.
councillors may be having trouble with connectivity.
We've got lost Councillor Van.
So you may like to just suspend the meeting until.
Yeah, so I think on that basis, we'll just suspend the meeting till we can try and get Councillor Vance back into the loop, please.
Mr Mayor, can we share the amended motion while we're waiting?
That's a very good idea if that's possible.
Councillors, we're still live streaming, just by the way, even though it's suspended.
Are we able to share that amendment? Thank you.
Councillor Vance looks like he's back.
You're back with us, Councillor Vance.
Yes, I believe so, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you. We'll resume the meeting now, please. We have a amended recommendation there. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's really just a very minor addition in that context, just to certainly make it clear in the resolution that we do want to do this. And in a normal circumstance, if this was you or I, we would use the land that we own to secure a loan from the bank. But of course, because the golf club and the bowls club is on Crown land, that is not their asset to use. Hence the reason for coming to council, for council to be guarantor. Now, it's very logical that council would support this, but for me, the key issue is not about the actual security. It's actually about ensuring the ongoing public use of the facility. And the perfect way for that to happen is for the golf and bowls club to continue right through the time of the loan and it's all paid out and they continue on. But should that not happen for some reason, and we do get strange events appear from nowhere like we had in January this year, it's appropriate that council has itself covered that the public use continues, because that's effectively the basis on which the money from the Stockade Hill will continue to flow to pay off the debt, that community use is still there. Hence the reason for the change in the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Easton.
I'll second the amended motion.
Thank you. Would any other councillors like to speak in relation to that amended recommendation? So all those in favour, please. Thank you. We now move on to, looks like we'll now move on to 13.13, COVID-19 business support, waiving of registration fees for food and accommodation businesses. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider waiving fees for food and accommodation businesses that are necessary for their registration in the context of COVID impact. So food and accommodation businesses in Pyrenees Shire have been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and council has previously considered reports on the impact and resolved to provide a range of support. State and Commonwealth governments have also made available a range of support mechanisms, including taxation relief, JobKeeper program, and more recently, the grants to enable increased outdoor dining, to name just a few. Council has received $250,000 grant from the state government to enable outdoor dining infrastructure and other measures to be taken to support the outdoor activity in retail precincts and adjoining food premises. Council has assigned a placemaking officer to this project to facilitate. This work is currently underway. We anticipate that being rolled out over the coming months. An economic task force has been established to provide input and advice to council on other mechanisms to support and enable economic recovery. And council has developed and implemented a tourism marketing strategy to encourage visitors to the region and increase economic activity. And that campaign is referred to as Unplug and Unwind in the Pyrenees. In the 2019-20 financial year, council also agreed to support a pro rata fee relief for food and accommodation businesses for that period up until the end of the financial year, given that they were not able to operate during the pandemic and up until the 30th of June. Since into the new financial year, however, many businesses continue to struggle and do not have the financial capacity to be able to meet the fee registration costs. As a result, the fee has not been implemented for those food and accommodation businesses, given the impact and the uncertainty that existed during this year so far. This report seeks council endorsement of the actions of the CEO to waive the registration fees for the food and prescribed accommodation businesses. The total estimated cost is in the order of $30,000, and that would be a cost borne by council for the number of registration businesses, and the fees associated with this range from in the order of $221 per annum for a prescribed accommodation premise through to around about $389 for a Class 1 food premise. Having regard to the impacts of COVID on these businesses and the opportunity for council to stimulate the economy through supporting this business activity, it's also acknowledged that council has a working capital surplus following the last financial year, and therefore capacity to be able to use some of those funds towards this purpose. I now make this recommendation that council endorses the waiving of fees associated with the registration and renewal of registration of food and accommodation businesses for 2020 and 2021, having regard to the financial impact of COVID-19 pandemic and in order to assist in stimulating the local economy.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, you have a recommendation there. Councillor Clark. Seconded Councillor Eason. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
There, now I'm right. My apologies. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a terrific initiative to carry on. It's, you know, it doesn't look like huge money, but it's about 1/3% of our rate, so it's not insignificant for a small council like ourselves to do this. And would I be right in understanding, Mr. Nolan, it's probably 100+ businesses that we feel we would get a benefit from this, at least out of us doing this?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Clark. It's in that order. The number varies a little bit from year to year.
Councillor Eason.
I want to support the CEO and the council in providing these sorts of relief for businesses that have done it tough this year, particularly. I recommend them.
Any other councillors like to speak on this item? Councillor Van.
Mr. Mayor, this is an opportunity for council to support our community. We don't look forward to having to do this, but under the circumstances, it's an opportunity for a little bit of goodwill and give them a bit of a kick up to get back into business. We don't want to see any of our businesses fall behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. I do think it's a fine initiative, and it's a help in some way to those businesses that have done it tough during the COVID time, and I'm sure the council is exploring other ways in which we may be able to help those businesses out and stimulate a bit of growth for them and some money for them as well, and help them out with waiving of fees. So all those in favour of that? Thank you very much. Item 13.14, 2021 councillor meeting dates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council's governance rules, which has recently been adopted by Council, has a requirement for Council to set an annual schedule of meetings and fix the date, time and place for its ordinary Council meetings and its special and statutory meeting. A schedule of meetings has been circulated to councillors, which provides for monthly meetings on the third Tuesday of each month, with the exception of December, when that is on the second Tuesday of the month. And each of the meetings are to be at Beaufort, with the exception of April and November, where the ordinary meetings are in Avoca, and the statutory meeting is scheduled for Lexton. So the meeting schedule also contains provision for briefings and community cuppers in many of our small communities, and it's Council's intent that the meetings in Beaufort and Avoca be changed slightly in their format in terms of how those community engagements are undertaken. But essentially the purpose today relates to the schedule of ordinary and special council meeting dates. So having said that, there is a recommendation before you, councillors, that council adopts the meeting schedule for 2021 as attached to this report and gives public notice in accordance with council policy governance rules of the proposed council meetings. And in addition to that recommendation, I just sort of draw your attention to the fact that it is possible for the dates may change, or dates can be postponed, or additional meetings can be called that are unscheduled, and all of those things are possible with governance rules. So it doesn't preclude, in council adopting this recommendation, it does not preclude those changes to occur.
Thank you, Mr.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Vance, you can speak on that?
No. Purely procedural matter, Mr.
Councillor Keogh.
Only just to make the comment, we love getting around our communities, and I think this reflects that. So thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? Thank you. And look, it's just a fantastic opportunity, especially those community cuppers. I'm really looking forward to, and I'm sure I know the other councillors are as well. And it's an opportunity for us to get out to those little communities right out there and reach out and I'm hoping we can get back to those as soon as we possibly can under the circumstances. All those in favour? Thank you. That brings us to our councillor reports and general business. So I might just go from the top of the list. So Councillor Keogh, Mount Emu Ward, if you could give us your councillor activity report, please.
I'd love to. Thank you so much. Caretaker period has changed things a little bit, and it felt like we were in limbo there a little bit as far as progressing projects. But during that time, of course, our council team has worked really hard to move on and finish a number of projects that across our area, and particularly in the Mount Emu ward, we've had the Snake Valley Skate Park finished. There's still some elements to occur, but it's being able to be used by a number of locals, and it has attracted a number of non-locals as well. It's such a fine facility, and so it's very exciting, and I know the community has welcomed that, and a lot of activity there. Very exciting as we've come out of COVID. So we haven't actually been able to have a very formal opening, but it's very well loved. We've also had a number, and we thank the team for getting a number of bridge and road projects completed, which were very important, and being able to utilise that time was fantastic to keep people employed as well. Also, our roadside maintenance, the mowing, has been occurring, which has been fantastic, and making sure we're mitigating a lot of the concerns with that. We've also got a few other exciting projects happening. One particularly exciting one in Caramballick at the hall there, through the drought funding support. We've got a great little servery that's happening in the hall that's just finished completion in the hall there, and that will open it up to a number of other community activities for that area, which is quite southern part of our shire, but a great little community there that will be able to benefit from that. We've also got a number of other little projects. There's an op shop proposal just starting, and looking at utilising the Snake Valley Uniting Church Hall. And this is just such a brilliant example of community groups coming together to share facilities and to share ideas and really make them happen. So Snake Valley would benefit greatly from a great little op shop like that, and it would also bring a lot of people into the area too, we hope. So that'll be exciting. We've also had the Snake Valley Reserve on Pitton Road. They've continued to be very busy maintaining and running working bees as soon as they were able to come together after COVID. So that's an exciting opportunity for the Reserve Committee. On the same sort of theme, the MAG Dam Committee have also got together and worked with Dwelt to start looking at some cleanup around that dam, which is quite a central part of Snake Valley and a great asset again for the community. So also with a focus on making sure that they're containing any unwanted weeds and making sure they're being dealt with appropriately. So again, I'd just like to say again, thank you to our great community for being so diligent, and it's a promising time and exciting time as we come out of lockdowns. It's still a time of importance that we're protecting each other and ourselves. So continue to look out for each other, and I guess there's lots of things happening that I'd like to finish on that I think there's a great sense of positivity around, and I'm looking forward to this area at this time as we move into Christmas. So thank you. That's all from Mount Teamy Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark, Ursula Dunenwald, I might move to you, please.
I'll get my technology sorted. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So the same thing, I think it's been a little different, but it's great to see activity, I think, in nearly all of my small communities going on courtesy of council. So things are progressing pretty quickly with the Lexington Hub. The old golf course building has gone and the site's been pegged out. And I think for the benefit of everybody, the builders have actually employed a site manager who is a former resident of Lexington. So that's a real handy in the sense of things, and I've had a bit of feedback from a couple of the committee members that he's already been asking a few questions about where's the water and that kind of stuff. So there's a really good liaison going on there with the local community, which is terrific. There was a meeting at Warborough a fortnight ago with our drought officer for the new tennis courts with the committee of management for the rec reserve, and that again went very well. And I've been working, and council officers have been working to help the Raglan Hall secure the money for the recladding and protection of their walls. As I understand it, at this point in time, we've got 3 of the 4 walls funded. We've just got 1 more to go. So that's gone on really well. In terms of some of the other activities of council, most of those are on hold and be coming back on stream in the next couple of weeks. Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance will be having its annual meeting, I think, in a fortnight. It was supposed to be this week, but there's been a number of announcements today, more in a community sense than in a council sense, but certainly really positive in the renewable energy space, that things that CVGA have been lobbying for some time in the state budget. So again, that's very good. And like Councillor Keogh, it's good to see the mower out and about on the roadsides, and the townships I know won't be far away. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance, Decameron Ward, move to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Remembrance Day, I was able to lay a wreath at a service here in Landsborough, even though COVID was still, restrictions were about. We had a roll-up of about 10, 12 people that paid their respects. The stat meeting, of course, I attended. Like the other riding councillors, the mowing and grading around the roadsides has been great in the northern end of the Shire. Finally, the graders are not only grading the shoulders, they're grading the table drains and they're grading out to the edge of the trees on the side. So when you traverse our roads now, you do so with a lot more safety. You have a much better view. It was pleasing to see, thanks to a wind farm grant, that the local newsletter published their 150th edition in full colour. A great little effort on behalf of the current committee that run that newsletter. They send out in the proximity of 450 newsletters every month. So it spreads far and wide. It doesn't only just cover the locals, but it covers people that used to be local and live even as far away as overseas. And also it was nice to see that there was a new floor put in the entrance to the Landsborough Hall through the ticket office. The White Ants had been having a great old time during COVID, but they've been extinguished, so that's good to see. And last but not least, it was some great sadness that I found out about the loss of one of our local lads in Jeff Jolly. Jeff was, along with Alan Salter, the Landsborough 2002 Tom Quilty. They were the ones that really got it up and going, and unfortunately we've lost Jeff. But in a manner of recognition of his lifetime dedication to the home that he grew up in, Landsborough, there's been a mural painted on the side of the pavilion over at the Sports Oval. And if anybody has the opportunity, it's worth a drive just to visualise Jeff and his horse. Wonderful. Ballet, Jeff Jolly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Move to Councillor Easton of Avoca Ward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a quiet time during the election, but since the election, there's been a number of things. Minister Sykes came up to Avoca, to the railway station, had a look around. It's lovely to see ministers from the government come and have a look at projects that are going on out there in the country. She's a country lass, I believe, from the Benalla region, so she enjoys getting out of Melbourne and seeing where the government's money is being spent and how it's being spent and what the community gets out of it. It was very interesting to talk to her. On Remembrance Day, we too had a small ceremony here in Avoca. The local primary school, I thought, did a wonderful job. They brought along 3 or 4 kids to lay a wreath, but they also brought along the technology that we're using here tonight. And they had someone stream the whole laying of the wreath and the ceremony back to the school. And the kids in the classroom were there, and I happened to be standing behind the streaming, and you could see the kids in the classroom standing when the last post was being played. It was really well done by the school that they could incorporate everybody but not bring them along because of COVID-19. Really, really well done. And lastly, last week I was invited along to the Food Pantry AGM to install the new executive team. It's a community group that does an absolutely wonderful job across our community and provides support to people that need it. They do it quietly. There's no fanfare or anything of that nature. They just quietly go about their job and do a brilliant job in doing that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Myself, attended the statutory meeting. Was pleased to open up the Beaufort Bowl season, and I'm told I have to work on my technique. So that's a work in progress. Attended the Beaufort Football Club AGM, and they'll have a busy year ahead of them after not playing for a whole year, which a lot of other clubs were in the same boat. I think it will be a fair job to sort of try and pick up and get going for next year, but they've got a good crew up there, and I'm confident they'll give it the best shot and they'll field some sides and be competitive for next year. So that's really pleasing. I also laid a wreath on Remembrance Day. It's a day special to my heart. The father returned serviceman, so that's a fairly special day for me. So that's good. It's pleasing to see, even though when we're in caretaker mode, I agree with the other councillors, we just see so much still going on with the indoor and outdoor staff. They're busily behind the scenes working, and the outdoor staff are perhaps a bit more visible with the graders and the machinery, but the indoor staff are working very hard to try and play catch up and meet those deadlines and keep those projects and things moving behind the scenes. So I thank them very much for their hard work. And their continued hard work, both the indoor and outdoor staff, and they do a fantastic job. And it's been made so difficult over the last, 9 to 10 months with the COVID restrictions. So the other thing, I've done a little bit of work behind the scenes with Beaufort Secondary College, and they've got a hands-on learning program up there, which I'm really, really keen to help and assist them with. So that's a continual work in progress. Not much more, just like to say that I was really, really pleased during the tough times with COVID and the lockdown to see the generosity and goodwill of the people across our municipality. So I know that's happened across the nation, no doubt, but, it's closer to your heart when it happens in your own municipality and people you see and know, and that generosity and goodwill and the patience and resilience of people, young people to old people and everyone in between, has just been fantastic, and that includes the patience and resilience of the council, the councillors and all the staff. So I really, really thank them, and I look forward to moving back to some sort of normality, whatever that shall be or whatever that will look like. But, we'll all be working hard to try and get back to that as soon as we can. So I think that brings us to about a close. So I'd just like to say before I finish that I'm pleased to have meandered my way through my first meeting as chair, but I would really like to thank the people that took the time to submit those questions during the public participation time, because I think that's probably the most questions I've seen submitted to a council meeting in my time here. So it's really, really pleasing to see that they took the time to compose those questions and send them in for our consideration. So I really thank them. That's it. So
I just alert you to the fact that we do have a closed item to consider in camera, and just a correction to the recommendation there around moving into closed camera. It does refer to the 1989 Act instead of the 2000 Act. There's just one item for council to consider as a closed council item.
Okay, so we'll move into the closed council. So, thank you, Ron. Seconded by Councillor Keogh. All those in favour? Yep.